Okay. Yeah, so I was just going to ask you to just chat about the kind of thematic brief, and then yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can kind of get stuck into it. Yeah.
sure. So when I was thinking about home, because I was born in Shanghai and I came to Australia when I was 8, so I feel like I relate more to the Australian lifestyle and just so used to living here since I've been here since primary school. But I guess at the same time, when I think about home, it's going to be that mixture of everything that I was kind of brought into. And I think when I was watching Jeremy and James yesterday, it was really interesting to see their take because they were um, taking it very literal, but then also James has was not born in Australia as well, and their take was really just interesting. And then when I first started this brief, I started off quite literal as well. I was thinking, well, when I was in Shanghai, I lived in a small apartment with intergenerational living arrangements. So I lived with my mum, my grandma, and my great grandma. So the four of us lived in like this 1, 2 bedroom apartment. And it was very normal because everyone did that. We were really close to my cousins. I'm an only child because of the one child policy. So
Mm.
the shift was so different coming to Australia because my dad came first. And then so when I moved over, I went from this like 23-story apartment tower in a small bedroom down to like just sparse. And I remember sitting on the plane looking out the window and it was like just when you fly over the central Australia bit, it's like very deserty. So I was like, where are we
Right.
going? What is this
How
place? And it's
disappointing.
funny
Yeah.
because, yeah, and I was like, where and I think it's funny because after at uni I actually studied urban planning. So for I think 7 years of my life I did a lot of aerial studies and planning. So seeing the aerials and kind of linking that, I wanted to bring some of those elements into my design. And I think as I went literal and I got some of these apartment outputs and housing outputs, it just didn't feel like me. So I kind of went back to my approach in art and just kind of go with the flow and just kind of pick the different ingredients that I lean towards and then kind of just mix them up. So I'm hoping that's how it'll come through today. And then you'll see, I guess, my workflow in that sense. It's going to be very unorganized, very different to the other two.
Cool. No, that's great. Yeah, that's like different approaches to thematic brief. That's awesome. That's what we're after. I think it's always interesting. I mean, I know James
Yeah.
yesterday, asked him to do a poster, and he's a logo designer, so he kind of brought that vibe into tackling the brief. It's just
Yeah.
really really interesting to see. It certainly is for me anyway.
That was great. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And it was really good to see a snippet of their process. And I was like, oh, he's so organized. I was like, mine's gonna be make this picture, make that picture, get all the ingredients first, and
Yeah,
then think about how it might come together.
that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. That's great.
So my when I was first thinking about all the different differences in the homes that I've had, a lot of it kind of, I always kind of go back to the floral. So you see this Shanghai white magnolia flower because that's the flower of Shanghai city. And it's got like this beautiful scent and it reminds me of home because I think when you think about Shanghai now, it's such a like futuristic city. You think about the Pearl Tower, you think about like the really famous skyscrapers along like the really futuristic areas of Shanghai. But I think when I was growing up, I just remember home being going to the park with my grandpa because he used to come every Sunday on a bike and take me to this park. So I think as a kid, a lot of my childhood has linked to Shanghai because that's the period I was there. And I think nature has like that ongoing thread through the different homes I've had, even in Australia. Like I think now in Australia, I take the kids to the park all the time. Like we live through lockdown. So I think the different florals and the nature aspect of it, I think is a really beautiful thread that I kind of want to bring in. So it's not so like the structural part of it. And I guess it's when you think about like the quotes, home is where the heart is. I do feel more now that I have kids because it's your family is your kids and who you're surrounded by there's a and then when you actually look at the word home in Chinese, jia, it translates to two meanings. So it's both home and family. So it's actually the one word.
Oh
So yeah,
wow,
yeah. So it's
cool.
like jia is like home. You can be the physical home, but if you add a person next to it, it just becomes home, like your family. So I thought that was really interesting take. So I was playing around with like the Chinese idioms, like just thinking about because with the Chinese idioms and the phrases, I like to share some of them with my kids because my Chinese isn't very good. It's like primary school level, but when I have to explain to them, it helps me improve my Chinese as well. So there's one idiom called uh, 家和万事兴. So it's like if your family is your home is harmonious, everything will prosper. So I kind of want to be create something that's harmonious and kind of tied through the landscape. So this magnolia flower is kind of a motif I kind of want to have in my poster. But I wasn't really sure what layout I wanted to be, but I quite like this one. So sometimes if I like one specific image, like the quality of it, I'll save that and use that as the next style reference. So this one, for example, I quite like it on the black background. So maybe for the next one, say white magnolia flower. Maybe I want it zoomed out a bit with branches on black background. So for example, if I like the composition of this one, I could download this, put it into the composition reference, and then use this picture in the style reference to give me a few more choices. Like this is really beautiful. But I kind of want a few more flowers. So if I make it plural. So the good thing with AI is that it's very literal. So sometimes I'll be like, it's not giving me what I want. And I realize I'm not using an S. So it's giving me a
Right.
singular flower rather than multiple flowers. So these are some of the images I'll save. Maybe I'll favorite them. Oh, see, it's giving me blue. Why is it? Okay, so composition, if I want this one with this style. See if that works. So I think I always start with something simple just to see what Firefly will give me um, based on a couple of words without making it too complicated, because then I don't know what to tweak later on. Like I'm not sure what it's taking or not. So that's giving me more flowers. It's
That's cool.
furry. So maybe this one is something I like. And sometimes if I quite like this design, but I don't like the composition, instead of just regenerating 10 different versions, I will use gen fill and just expand it. If I want a more negative space on the top, I'll expand it at the top. If I want less, I'll do the bottom, get a new composition, and then put that back into the composition output to give me a bit more control.
Right.
So
And can you do that within Firefly, or do you need to take that into Photoshop to do and then re-upload it?
yeah, I can go edit and do generative fill.
Yeah.
And from here, it actually expands faster than Photoshop.
I think this is like we were chatting about it a little bit before we went live about
Mm.
like I feel like very often the version of what you're using on the web outside of the app seems to
Mm.
be either faster and sometimes better, or maybe slightly newer version. I'm not sure. I'm not giving away anything because I know nothing. But I've found personally that if I want something to be the best version of it, if there is a web-based version dealing with AI, it tends to be a little bit faster.
Yeah, I agree. I always usually base it on the Firefly web one, and then I put it into Photoshop because when I've got like, 50, 60 layers, it will take the information of the whole page. Sometimes it will take the styles of different layers, and because I mix so many different styles, sometimes it gets really confused and it doesn't give me the specific style or quality that I'm after. So I end up using images directly from Firefly and then put it back into Photoshop if I need it to be very specific. I mostly use Photoshop to gen fill like the joins of the different styles, so it blends really nicely, and I think that's perfect for that. So this might be something I download because it's got quite a nice composition. And then if I go back to Firefly, I was playing around with, I was thinking about like the apartment living and the kind of the bird's eye view of the different landscapes. And I kind of wanted
Mm.
to do the differences of the two. And I always like to mix in some of like my physical paintings, whether it's composition, because it's very abstract. It's not very rigid. Sometimes when you use direct AI outputs, because it's so literal, it'll take the literal sense of lots of things, even when it comes to composition, like how a picture should look. It'll be very proper, very perfect. So putting in some of these abstract, random layouts makes it not think more, but it gives it a bit more to play with. So then you don't get the very stock standard stock imagery, unless that's what you're after.
Right.
And one of my old paintings, it's funny because this painting is named In Between and Overseas. And it was something that I was playing around with some of like something that's a bit more of like a Chinese composition, like with the moon gate and everything. It was like using a lot of calligraphy ink to cover it. And it was just something that I was playing around with. And I thought it was quite a nice composition that I quite like. So I might use that as an input, but maybe if we do aerial of apartments, um, just to see what that looks like. And
That's
then we
cool.
can put that into the composition.
And in Moongate, like in
Mm.
China, like is that it's like the gateway in I've seen it in I think gardens, like some of the
Yeah,
Chinese
yeah,
gardens. Is that
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like the round doors and things.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So I kind of like, I don't know, even if I stay away from like the Chinese aesthetic, sometimes I always feel like the choices I pick end up going back to some of like the ink painting styles or like simplified versions of things. And yeah, so it's just so so these apartments are quite like high-risey, but a bit modern, but we
Mm.
probably won't see the details later on. So I think if you're thinking about what type of images you want to collect for your collage or for your mixed media piece, if you know you're not going to, go down to the minute detail, sometimes it doesn't look realistic because it's missing doors or it's missing things that make it real. You don't need to spend so much time on it. It's kind of like cutting out an image from a magazine. So the cool thing about AI is I think people are like, oh, it's like copyright issues, whereas this is you're just creating fresh stuff for yourself. So you're not actually using any images. I'm not even using stock images because you can build it from scratch.
Yeah.
um, so we put the composition here, and then we might not even use one aerial of apartment. Maybe we can do. I wonder if I put Shanghai, what it will come up with, just to see.
Usually get like a landmark of some kind, right? We'll
Yeah.
see. Um, there's two streamers in the chat. We got Annika in there before, might still be here, and James as well. So James from yesterday. He says, "You're living dangerously using Firefly on a live stream. I'm never confident with my internet. It is always a double whammy because your computer's like trying to generate stuff. Your camera, you're sharing your screen, we're streaming, and then it's also using the
That's
internet
true.
to like crunch
I
stuff.
feel
So
like that about more about Photoshop. So I'm more scared to use Photoshop because it lags more for me, whereas Firefly's more internet dependent. And I think if I have a good connection, then it's good.
yeah, most of the stuff's happening on a server somewhere else, right? Yeah,
This actually looks quite like the apartments I lived in, surprisingly.
right.
Kind of like this old school, like brutalist feel, and I think this is quite cool. So
Yeah,
I might keep this. It's almost like the 360 cameras.
yeah, yeah. Like, yeah,
Circle I put in, so that's quite, I might like that. So if I expand this out, just so I get all of the building bits, sometimes it might it'll probably give me a cleaner crop later on when I move into Express. But it also gives me a bit more wiggle room if I'm using parts of the image later on. Oh, cute. Right, so I probably don't want the building too high or too long. So let's download this one. And I think given the time, I'll probably move into Express and then I'll show you some of the other outputs I've used. So I played around with different paintings I've done and using that other physical painting with the moon gate, I mixed it with this inky one just to see what kind of landscapes I get. And I created some more and it came out more like inky,
Oh wow. Yeah.
painterly, which I think is cool.
It's cool.
Um, yeah, so you can keep mixing it. And then I tried to do a couple of low rise ones, and these ones are more like Australia, suburbia type
Oh
things,
yeah.
which I think is like what you'd see up in the sky, which I think is good. So if I start just popping things in, I think I mentioned at the start, I first started creating because I was on maternity leave. And I think a lot of my digital work and physical work, I kind of like get lost in this space. And with my digital stuff, I always kind of go into these like imagined landscapes and like alien landscapes. And I feel a bit like that sometimes living in Australia because I relate to both being Aussie and also relate to being Chinese. So depending where I am, I think James said that yesterday, like you don't
Yeah.
really belong. So I feel like having some elements of that like alien landscape is something I want to incorporate to kind of bring it together. I had a couple of different choices. Like you don't really know. Actually, I need to not maximize. So this was one that I had. I think this will just give you a really nice crop if you have something like that to split in Express. Otherwise, I thought this one was really beautiful. It's kind of like 3D-esque and it's got some textures that we can keep. So maybe we'll use this one in Express. So yeah, I was saying before the stream started that I use Express a lot just to play around with different composition before I kind of go ham in Photoshop and kind of blend them together. Because any movement you make in Photoshop, because sometimes all the smart objects link up and then all of a sudden your size is so big, it really lags up my laptop because I'm mostly working off my laptop. But the Express remove background function is like my most used one because it's so fast and it's so crisp. Like this is so quick to just give me that background.
It's pretty
Um,
good. Yeah, I think we've used it quite a bit for
yeah, and then
cutting
even
heads out of
remove
things.
object or erase, it gives you really great results. So um, my chaotic process is now just dumping all the different things I've created into one and just see how it looks together for now. Um, So this one I probably should have expanded so I get that full circle, but it's okay. I'll just take out the background. We can mix the colors together a bit later using the different effects and adjustments, but at least I just kind of want to see what what we can get. Um,
Like from a beginning of a composition kind of perspective,
yeah,
just kind of
yeah, I
want to
think
move
I'm gonna
things
see how the
around. Yeah.
colors mix well together. Like because the landscape I picked has like pinks and blues. The blue's probably going to tie together, and I'll use some of my past work just to see if the colors match. If they kind of match, I might use that as a style reference in Firefly to then get that to look more harmonious before I use any adjustments, because that's always going to be easier than doing the physical adjustments. Even in Photoshop, you spend so much time tweaking, whereas if the images already look good together, there's less work on that half. So I used that image that I just showed you with another like apartment one, this one. And I
Oh
kind
yeah.
of like that. The buildings are like more twisted and you can't really see what it is. So it's just like the hint of high-rise buildings. So if I put this in and remove background. So this one I expanded to give me cleaner edges.
Mm.
And kind of, it doesn't have to fit perfectly, but at least you can kind of see the colors working together. I didn't think I initially wanted to add some text or some stories, but I was practicing my calligraphy for a workshop I'm holding this weekend for Chinese New Year, like red pocket decoration. So
Oh yeah.
I was practicing my writing. So my mom was going to laugh. She's like, "Oh, it's so ugly. Don't show people." So I just like a
Is
screenshot
your
of
mum
it.
very critical of your calligraphy?
So her calligraphy is really good. She used to write like these giant calligraphy words for the hospital she worked in because she had really nice handwriting. So I actually asked her to decorate some of the red pockets for me. So I was next to her writing this, and she's like, "Oh, this word is not right. The balance is all off." And I was like, "Oh, but this is good because you just like I literally took a photo of it, took a screenshot of it, and then you can pop it into Express, and then even if you remove background." You can quickly get these words out.
Oh
It's
wow.
probably mixed a bit, but like just as an example, you can like have it blended to
Yeah.
get, some more details later on, but I'll leave that there for now.
Mm.
And then we've got the flowers. See if here's some I prepared earlier.
Nice.
I didn't even save so my old house, when I was growing up in Australia, had like it was like an old brick, red brick, typical Australian 50s building, but
Mm.
it was covered in these flowers, and I thought having some of these would be really beautiful. If I go back, let's try it's probably a bit short.
It's
I think
funny. We were
unless you
talking about Australian foliage yesterday on one
oh,
of the streams. I think Jeremy's one as well.
yeah. Yeah, so if you put photo, you get more realistic ones.
Yeah.
I think I tried to do kangaroo paw because there was quite a lot of them, but then it takes the literal kangaroo paw.
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, oh, that's not what I want.
It's
So I think
amazing.
Australian florals, then you get more try native.
For those that don't know, kangaroo paw is a type of plant native to Australia that it's kind of quite
Yeah,
long. It has like a red thing that kind of looks a little bit like a paw on the end. They're really cute.
it's quite pretty. These
Lucky
ones
to
here.
have one. Yeah,
Yeah, like that.
they're cute.
Very nice. This is cute. So these, like you kind of just know. So depending on how I want the image to sit, I might get some more options of the different flowers just so I can play around with a bit more. I also exported a couple of like interlocking windows that you can get in China, just like the patterns. You can see this.
Oh
Because
yeah. Okay.
if I get some of these patterns, it'll give me a bit more texture on the final image, or I can even use them as windows.
Right.
I think will look quite cool. Um, I think after I pop these in, uh, so the cool thing with the when you have black and white images is I think at the end, the idea is like if you use this as multiply,
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter what the background looks like. You kind of get this really crisp outline.
Yeah.
And then if I make the screen, like you can, like this could be a poster by
Yeah.
itself.
You could. Yeah. You could be done if you really wanted
Fun.
to be.
I'm trying to, but like it will give you a bit more room to play around. So I think
Hmm.
this is a bit where you can try and make it a bit more harmonious. And maybe I'll add a, this is me just thinking out loud. So it feels like I'm by myself.
Is that how
Um,
you always work? Like it's kind of like you just kind of get started,
yeah,
and then kind of just keep mixing and keep changing and trying different things and adding different elements until you're sort of satisfied.
yeah, definitely. I think I'm
Yeah.
I'm very like go with the like lean into what I'm feeling like it looks good or not.
Mm.
Like this could be the moon. I use I play around day and night. See, this is another magnolia flower. So if I flip it to the top and see if I can get it to look less, this gives me a bit more space.
Yeah, it's quite a refreshing way, like more of an artistic approach, I think, to like how I was traditionally trained as a designer. Like, so it feels refreshing and very alien at the same time to just kind of
Yeah.
be like, cool, let's just start.
What
Like,
is she doing?
no, I mean, I'm used to it, very used to it now after so many years of doing Adobe Live and different creators coming on. You know, it's just my
Yeah. Not
background, graphic
different.
design. It's like there's only one way to approach a brief, you know.
Yeah.
But I find it very refreshing. I'm trying to remember who was the other person that came on that. Yeah, it's kind of like a mashup approach, but a bit more of an artistic approach, I would assume.
Yeah.
Um, is that where it comes from? Do you think, like from your traditional, you know, painting? I think you were talking about how you sort of
But
it
I'm
was more of
also,
an expression and going with the
yeah.
flow and vibes and stuff. Yeah.
No, I think the cool thing is, I think because I had a career before I started painting, painting was just like really for fun and experimental. And I think as a little, you're taught like all the technical stuff, how you're supposed to draw something, how you're supposed to do something. And I think I threw that out the window and just like did whatever was cool and fun.
Yeah.
And I think fluid medium really helped me to like let go of some of like the things that you were taught and learned to just like experiment more. So I feel like I've kind of re taught myself how to just play. And I feel like I took that physical painting aspect of it and took it into the digital aspect. So then I think that's probably why I really enjoy AI art so much because sometimes like, oh, I just want to know what this will look like mixed with this. And then that will generate more ideas for me. And then I'll go back and pull something out from the archives and be like, oh, this would work really well with this, which I never thought could work. So like I think now this is something that I really like the composition of. And then I can start playing around with like the different colors and maybe I can add some more words or different things. Like maybe I'll put the window I had before in here just to see what it looks like. Do screen.
So I guess that approach, like my follow up question would be, how do you know when you're done?
I think you just know. Like I
Right.
think right now I could be done, but you can keep like I guess you can keep constantly playing with it. Like if I put this behind the mountain, that could be really cool too.
Mm.
Um, I think it's personal taste. I think sometimes someone might be watching this later on and be like, she should have left it 5 minutes before she
Right.
like
Yeah.
I think it's always going to be yeah, you're always going to be thinking, oh, is this the right time to finish? But it's weird. I have painted something that was like 2 meters by 2 meters, and I finished it in half a day because I just knew it was done. And I
Oh,
have
wow.
one that's like, 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, and I'm like, it's just sitting there for like 3 years because like it's not finished, it's missing something, and I don't know what it
Wow.
is. So I just
Wow.
let it sit there. It's funny. I guess a time limit helps. I guess I'll keep working on this until we are done.
Right. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. There's a deadline. It has to be done. Right.
Yeah.
Mm. It's amazing how much I think the calligraphy to me is
Mm.
adding, like
Mm.
to, and it reminds me of yesterday with James, and because James is doing a poster. I think he called them mouse mouse text
Oh,
or
I heard that. That
something,
was the first time I heard
right?
that too.
And I'd
Yeah,
never
yeah.
heard that before. I knew what he was talking about. I hadn't heard that terminology before.
Yeah, yeah.
But just the so for those that didn't see it, just like kind of you see a poster and then really little, like the poster's designed to be seen from quite far away, but then quite small. There's like quite a lot of little kind of copy, almost like a movie poster where there's the big part of the poster and you go in really close and it's like directed by, starred by, produced by, and it's like can be very, very
Mm.
tiny. It's like Universal Pictures and it's got the Dolby logo in there that's like 2 pixels wide. Things like that kind of add some sort of legitimacy to it being something that would be printed maybe,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
I think James used the word blueprint. And I find the calligraphy is doing something like that to me as
Mm.
well. I think,
That finishing touch
yeah, maybe it is. It's like a signature on an artwork or something. I don't know I don't know how to express how I feel about it, but yeah.
signature.
So yeah, it's like a signature. Maybe that's it.
This is my Chinese name. So Chen is actually my maiden name. And I feel like since I took on Chiang, which is my married name, because that's when I started painting, I kind of miss some of it. So I think I put that into some of my artwork. So then my real name is also there. If I
Right.
put it, yeah, I've replaced it. So if I do screen, I can put this here, move this up. Like the final details makes a big difference.
Mm.
Multiply.
Have you ever tried to print anything from Express?
I haven't, but I know Kit printed some stuff directly from Express for her collage kit, and they came out really nice.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see. Just thinking about like as a poster, because we've got the aspect ratio, but
Mm.
presumably it's 72 DPI, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah, to
Um,
see the quality of it.
yeah, yeah.
This was another one that I just put it in just to see if it gives me any cool textures or
Mm.
anything. Maybe I'll get rid of it. Maybe I'll try like an actual paint texture. I have, because this is just a page from my sketchbook, and I turn up the contrast to get some of the different textures.
Mm.
But because it's got like the light and dark strokes, it'll give me some swoosh.
Oh, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's kind of, I don't know if I like the green. If I flip it around.
It's nice to blend in, like getting the texture, because there'd be so many textures like that you could get from the library, right? But
Yeah.
there's something very nice about kind of bringing in something that you've made, you've made yourself, like it's unique and
Yeah, yeah. And
hand
I think
done.
I feel about AI art as well, because I think once you start putting your own ingredients in, you're really remixing it with like a whole bunch of different things that you wouldn't have made to
Yeah,
create something that feels more like yourself, whether it's even just the colors or like the composition that you have a bit more control over. It makes a really big difference. Like I think this just makes the mountains and the background kind of come together a bit more. I think I had a where is that Australian flower? I wonder what it will look like if I put it behind the window. It looks like it's oh, I think I'll make it bigger. Or maybe I'll good old remove background.
love that. Oh, James is still here, and he's mentioned he's got giving us some context. I first heard the term mouse text when working with the brand guidelines template from the future. It's how they referred to the labels, mini headings, and page numbers on a presentation. Okay,
Ah,
so like in the yeah, I know what you're talking about.
that's handy to know.
Mouse text.
Very cool.
Maybe it's because they're like running around the edges. It's a little bit like terminology you don't like it. Everyone kind of just understands, but don't really know where it came from. It's like the Photoshop when you select something and have the marching ants. Like everyone, I just learned they were called marching ants from like design
Oh
school
my
or
God.
something.
I didn't even know that.
Yes. Okay. Great. So there's one. So like in Photoshop when you select anything, and you
Yeah.
have it's like a dotted perforated line, like the dotted line
Yeah.
around whatever, but it
Um,
sort of looks like it's moving a little bit,
yeah, yeah,
tiny little
yeah.
bit. Yeah, I was told that that was marching ants for a very long time, and then I don't think that's
Wow.
officially what they're called, but a lot of people knew what I was talking about. But I think that might be an old school bit of
New.
terminology now.
Is it? Well, see, I never really learned Photoshop properly. Probably that's why I don't share on live because it's embarrassing. It's like I don't know how to use any of the tools. There's too many. So sometimes I use James's tricks. It's like I have his tips saves every now and again.
Yeah, the school of James Barnard is fine.
Yeah.
I think that's like the changing thing, right? Like, back in the day, like you went to design school or advertising school and then went into that field. Whereas now there's so many creators that have come from a different field and self-taught, right? Or just,
Yeah.
picked it up and ran with it. So it's quite different. But you show your how old you are, I think, when you talk about stuff like that. I shouldn't do it live. I'm young and cool.
Like when you get the
Promise.
badge at Max, and then they're like,
Yeah.
"How long have you used the program?" Like, oh,
Yeah.
too long, but I still don't know what I'm doing.
Too long. Yeah. Same.
Now I'm just playing around with different composition. I was like, oh,
Yeah. Where's that little brief? For those that don't know, I'm just showing the brief for a second here as
mm,
well. So this is the brief. So it's kind of like thematic streams, which we're doing for a while. We'll see how we go. I've been having a great time actually. We only started yesterday, and it's been lots of fun and something a little bit different to be doing here on Adobe Live. But for those that are interested, it's just a one-page, very very brief. But just asking some of our creators to use whatever programs they would like. The only real structure around it is that it needs to be based on the topic of home and what that means to them. And they can use any app they want. And what are we? The aspect ratio just needs to be A3 and vertical rather than landscape. So it's a very broad brief, which I think probably works quite well for you, Joy, I would assume. Whereas I
yeah.
think James and Jeremy were sort of thinking, give me some rails, like give me some more, like narrow it down for me so I don't have to think of the entire world. I think, sometimes it sounds like it's a great brief. It's like, cool, you can do whatever you want. And then you're like, great, what do I want? Like, then you spend so much time in your head trying to think about what you need to do. So when you get a broad brief like that, you're like, great, cool, I can interpret it and kind of go, start creating based on these things? Or do you think the same as our friends from yesterday?
I think I started off quite literal. Like I exported some designs. If I can find an image of like tall apartments, but in like abstract scenery or like backgrounds.
Yeah.
And then when I started kind of collaging it like this, I was like, oh, it doesn't feel like me. Like it doesn't feel like a piece of my artwork. And I think it's hard to find your own style, especially with like exported AI stuff, even if you mix some of the stuff. So I think unless you put your own touch in or you add different elements, it's not going to be yours. And I
Mm.
feel like with some of the stuff I share, a lot of the experiments just look really cool, but anyone really could do that. But when you start mixing them together or start animating the way you want, you kind of give your own touch to it and then it kind of comes to life. So I think when I started mixing around with like the different apartments, I was like, oh, it's cool, but it doesn't like if I think about home, it doesn't draw me in. Whereas this, when I look at it, I was like, yeah, it's got like such a big, like all these links that feel personal to me. So I think that's why I thought the natural elements really made me feel like I'm home. I think even from my studio, a lot of the time when I like look out the window, I see like the garden, and I think that keeps me sane. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of comes through. So I think yeah, it was good that I moved away from the literal sense. So it was interesting to see the other two artists yesterday, like their approach and their backstory, which was really cool. I'm
Yeah.
excited to watch the other artists that you have on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be fun. We'll put together like a special playlist for it and things. I think it'll
Mm,
be nice to kind of, they've all been very interesting to me. So it's been super cool. But actually, we've only got about a minute left until we're cut off. So
mm,
we might leave it there. And I think maybe we'll invite you to come back in a couple of
yeah.
weeks. We'll get you to come back and we'll kind of continue down the path.
Maybe I'll play around with this because I'm quite happy with how it's looking, and I
Looks
might do a couple
great. Yeah.
different versions, and then maybe we can animate them and see if we can do a bit more.
That would be super cool. All right then. Well, thank you so much, Joy. It's been fantastic having you on, and happy New Year again. And thanks for sharing everything with us. And everybody will be back in about 10 minutes with Ramesh Hari Krishna Samy, who will be tackling the same brief. So it'll be very interesting to see how he approaches this.
Awesome.
But yeah, thanks again, Joy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you soon.